The piercing shriek of a high-security alarm shattered the midnight calm of the city's grandest jewelry pavilion, sending a wave of absolute panic through the central monitoring station as automated steel shutters began slamming shut. Through a thick cloud of flash-bang smoke, a solitary figure completely clad in aerodynamic matte black tactical gear burst through the shattered glass entryway, clutching a heavy reinforced titanium alloy briefcase in his right hand. Within 3 seconds flat, he cleared the perimeter fence and vaulted seamlessly onto a waiting Yamaha R1 superbike, its deep blue and black fairings gleaming under the harsh artificial streetlights like a predatory shark cutting through dark water. The massive 998 cubic centimeter cross-plane engine roared to life with a deafening metallic growl that echoed off the surrounding skyscrapers as he slammed the transmission into first gear and twisted the throttle to its absolute limit, launching the machine forward like a kinetic bullet leaving a barrel. Within moments, a chaotic sea of flashing red and blue lights flooded the avenue as a dozen high-performance police cruisers tore around the corner tires, screaming in a desperate attempt to close the gap, while an overhead police chopper activated its high-intensity searchlight, locking its blinding beam directly onto the speeding rider. Yet as the police command center scrambled every available unit across 5 sectors, the overriding emotion vibrating through the radio frequencies was not mere anger over a high-profile robbery, but absolute cold dread, because the item that had just been extracted from the impenetrable vault was the heart of the Eclipse, the single most heavily guarded, historically significant, and priceless diamond ever to be displayed in human history. This was no ordinary heist of opportunity. It was the opening move of a terrifyingly calculated game that would push the city's elite task force to the absolute brink of psychological collapse. High-definition security cameras equipped with advanced facial recognition software captured every single microsecond of the intrusion from 11 different angles. Yet the resulting footage proved utterly useless to the forensics team because the thief moved with the supernatural precision of a ghost who knew the exact blind spots of every lens. The laser grid array, which should have incinerated or trapped any living organism crossing its path, had been deactivated for a window of exactly 4 seconds, a temporal anomaly that required deep insider knowledge of the facility's proprietary mainframe architecture. Most baffling of all was the selective nature of the theft, because surrounding the central pedestal were millions of dollars worth of rare platinum necklaces, flawless emeralds, and historic royal crowns. Yet the intruder ignored them entirely, focusing exclusively on the single glass case housing the heart of the Eclipse diamond. This surgical focus led Chief Investigator Marcus Vance to conclude within minutes that they were not dealing with a desperate criminal or a standard syndicate, but a highly specialized operative executing a plan that had likely been meticulously engineered over several years. Every movement of the suspect, from the way he bypassed the pressure-sensitive floor plates to the specific angle at which he shattered the reinforced glass, suggested an intimate familiarity with the museum's innermost secrets, indicating a deep-rooted conspiracy that reached far beyond the criminal underworld into the very corporate boardrooms that funded the exhibition. The chase escalated into a terrifying display of mechanical dominance as the Yamaha R1 tore through the labyrinthine alleyways of the financial district, utilizing its unmatched power-to-weight ratio to leave the bulky police cruisers struggling in its wake. The rider navigated the narrow concrete corridors with terrifying confidence, leaning the superbike at impossible angles that defied physics, his knee sliders scraping against the asphalt as he took 90-degree turns at speeds exceeding 100 miles per hour. Commander Vance directed his units to establish immediate roadblocks at every major intersection, but the thief seemed to anticipate the police grid coordinates before they were even finalized over the radio waves, weaving through the gaps between concrete barriers with millimeters to spare. When two tactical sport utility vehicles attempted to box him in on a narrow bridge, the rider dropped 2 gears, snapped the throttle open, and forced the front wheel of the Yamaha R1 into the air, executing a precise mid-air maneuver that allowed him to scrape past the side mirrors of the police vehicles, leaving nothing but the smell of burning rubber and expensive aviation fuel behind. The police helicopter struggled to maintain its visual lock as the rider deliberately dove beneath low-clearance underpasses and multi-level parking structures, using the concrete geography of the city as a shield against aerial tracking. Back at the Central Precinct, digital forensics experts diving into the historical archives of the heart of the Eclipse stumbled upon a series of heavily redacted international intelligence files that cast a dark shadow over the entire investigation. The diamond was not merely a brilliant piece of pressurized carbon. It possessed a bloody and enigmatic lineage that officially ceased to exist in 1945 when it vanished from a secure vault in Berlin, only to mysteriously reappear at a public auction 7 decades later under a shell corporation registered in Panama. 3 separate independent investigators who had previously attempted to trace the true ownership of the gemstone had all met with fatal accidents within months of filing their reports, and their personal files had been immediately classified under national security mandates. As the current digital team attempted to bypass the encryption on the restricted files, their monitors suddenly blinked out, replaced by an automated system-wide lockdown command emanating from an external high-level government server located in Washington. It became instantly clear that the diamond was a catalyst for a much larger geopolitical cover-up, and that the powerful entities who sought its recovery were not interested in justice, but were desperately trying to permanently silence whatever secrets were etched into the stone's microscopic crystalline structure. Realizing the city center had become an inescapable grid of surveillance, the thief pivoted his strategy, directing the screaming Yamaha R1 toward the dark, winding stretches of the northern coastal highway, where the lack of traffic allowed him to fully exploit the superbike's top-end speed of nearly 200 miles per hour. The sound of the cross-plane engine transformed from a guttural growl into a high-pitched F1 scream that echoed off the jagged ocean cliffs as the machine blurred past darkened beach houses and isolated scenic viewpoints. Behind him, the line of chasing police vehicles began to thin out as the sheer speed of the pursuit caused multiple cruiser engines to overheat, while others simply could not match the terrifying cornering velocity of the two-wheeled machine. The flashing lights of the pursuing vehicles began to fade into distant red specks in his rearview mirrors, but the rider knew that the true danger lay ahead because the coastal highway offered no alternative exits for the next 20 miles, meaning the police had ample time to prepare a definitive choke point. With the black expanse of the Pacific Ocean on his left and sheer vertical rock faces on his right, the thief was flying down a beautiful scenic corridor that was rapidly transforming into a high-speed trap. Predicting this exact trajectory from the city's integrated traffic management system, the Highway Patrol deployed a massive multi-layered blockade across the narrowest section of the coastal highway just before the entrance to the Devil's Gate Tunnel. 3 armored tactical transport vehicles were parked sideways across the blacktop, completely sealing the roadway from barrier to barrier, while a specialized team of motorcycle officers stood ready with spike strips and high-velocity net launchers designed to shred tires instantly. The glowing headlights of the approaching Yamaha R1 appeared in the distance, a single piercing point of white light tearing through the coastal fog at a suicidal velocity that showed absolutely no intention of slowing down or surrendering. Officers tightened their grips on their standard-issue weapons as the distance closed to 500 yards, then 300 yards, with the engine roar becoming so intensely loud it vibrated the glass windows of the stationary police transports. At the final possible second, just as the tactical team braced for a horrific high-speed impact, the rider slammed on the rear brake, sending the superbike into a controlled sideways slide that kicked up a massive blinding screen of white smoke and pulverized rubber, completely obscuring the vision of everyone at the barricade. When the thick cloud of acrid tire smoke finally dissipated under the heavy ocean breeze, the tactical officers advanced cautiously with their weapons drawn and flashlights cutting through the gloom, expecting to find a mangled wreck or a cornered suspect ready to fight. Instead, they found the gorgeous blue and black Yamaha R1 resting perfectly upright on its kickstand, right in the center of the asphalt, its high-performance engine still idling smoothly with a consistent low rumble that sounded like a mechanical heartbeat. The titanium alloy briefcase from the museum vault was sitting securely strapped to the rear passenger seat, completely intact, without a single scratch or dent upon its polished metallic surface, as if it had been delivered via courier rather than through a chaotic high-speed pursuit. Commander Vance arrived at the scene moments later, stepping out of his vehicle and ordering his team to establish an immediate 500-yard perimeter around the motorcycle, believing the suspect must have jumped over the coastal guardrail into the churning ocean waters below. However, a thorough sweep, utilizing thermal imaging equipment, night vision drones, and K9 units, revealed absolutely no trace of human heat signatures along the rocky cliffs or in the freezing surf below. The lack of physical evidence at the abandonment site defied all logical parameters of modern criminal investigation because there were no footprints in the soft dirt bordering the highway, no fiber remnants on the seat of the motorcycle, and no fingerprints on the handlebars or the titanium briefcase itself. The forensic team spent 3 hours scanning every square inch of the asphalt, looking for any indication of a secondary getaway vehicle or a hidden parachute deployment. But it was as if the rider had simply evaporated into thin air while the motorcycle was still in motion. The internal digital diagnostic log of the Yamaha R1 revealed that its GPS tracker had been systematically fed a pre-recorded loop of false location data for the past 45 minutes, explaining how the rider had consistently evaded their tactical perimeters during the early stages of the chase. This revelation meant that the entire chase along the coastal highway had been an elaborately staged theatrical performance designed to draw the bulk of the city's police force away from the urban center, allowing the true culprit to move freely without fear of interception. With the media descending upon the scene like vultures, Commander Vance ordered the immediate transport of the recovered titanium briefcase to a secure underground laboratory beneath the central police precinct, where a team of bomb disposal experts and master locksmiths waited to open it. The briefcase was equipped with a dual-layer biometric scanner and a microscopic thermite charge designed to incinerate the contents if the lock mechanism was tampered with improperly, requiring the technicians to use specialized cryogenic liquid to freeze the internal circuitry before attempting to force the latches. The heavy metallic clicks echoed through the silent laboratory as the final locking pins disengaged and the heavy lid was slowly raised, revealing a custom-molded velvet interior that was designed to perfectly cradle the precise dimensions of the heart of the Eclipse diamond. A collective gasp of absolute disbelief echoed through the room as the high-intensity overhead laboratory lights revealed that the velvet cradle was completely empty, containing nothing but a single folded piece of heavy, cream-colored parchment paper. Vance reached into the case with gloved hands, unfolding the paper to find a single sentence written in elegant, flawless calligraphy that read, "You have been looking for the wrong thing from the very beginning." The psychological blow of the empty briefcase sent the entire police department into a state of absolute chaos as investigators realized that every resource expended that night had been directed toward a phantom target, while the real crime was taking place entirely outside their field of vision. At that exact moment, 300 miles away from the chaotic coastal highway, nestled deep within a secluded forest estate in the wealthy enclave of Blackwood Ridge, a completely different reality was unfolding in total silence. Inside a magnificent Gothic mansion, completely hidden from public view by towering ancient oak trees and state-of-the-art thermal cloaking security systems, a sophisticated, elegant woman dressed in a tailored crimson silk evening gown stood before a floor-to-ceiling panoramic window overlooking a private lake. She held a crystal glass of rare vintage wine in one hand, while her other hand casually operated a hidden biometric remote control concealed within the mahogany paneling of her private study wall. With a soft pneumatic hiss, a massive, hidden wall safe constructed of 3-inch thick depleted uranium plate slowly slid open, revealing a velvet-lined chamber glowing under a soft amber display light. Resting precisely in the center of that hidden vault was the actual heart of the Eclipse diamond, its countless facets refracting the amber light into a dazzling display of deep cosmic violet and crimson shadows that looked almost hypnotic. But the priceless gemstone was not resting alone, because directly beneath its sharp-pointed pavilion lay two objects that possessed an infinitely greater historical value: an ornate hand-forged iron key dating back to the 14th century, and a brittle piece of vellum map covered in ancient cryptographic symbols that outlined a hidden geographical location beneath the Vatican archives. The mysterious woman set her glass down, her fingers gently brushing across the cold surface of the diamond before resting upon the ancient key as a cold, satisfied smile spread across her flawless features. She picked up the key, holding it up to the ambient light, and whispered in a soft, melodic voice that held no trace of fear that finally it has returned to its rightful bloodline. Outside, the wind howled through the black pine trees as the mansion's automated security systems shifted to maximum lockdown status, permanently sealing the perimeter. The screen fades into absolute pitch black, leaving nothing but the haunting echo of her voice, because while the police were busy hunting a ghost on a Yamaha R1, the true architects of history had just secured the final piece of a puzzle that would rewrite the global balance of power forever. The humiliation that followed the failed pursuit of the Yamaha R1 was not merely professional, it was absolute, as the entire police force found itself the subject of international mockery in the global media cycles. Commander Vance stood alone in the dim light of his office, ignoring the mountain of paperwork and the furious emails from the mayor's office as he focused entirely on the single scrap of parchment paper left in the empty briefcase. He utilized a high-resolution scanning electron microscope to examine the paper's fiber structure and ink composition, revealing that it originated from a specific paper mill in northern Italy that had ceased operations in the late 17th century. This was not a modern prank. It was a message delivered with deliberate, archaic precision by someone who existed within the upper echelons of history. The ink itself contained trace elements of rare minerals that were only found in geological deposits beneath the Vatican's secret archives, suggesting that the thief was not just a criminal, but a gatekeeper of ancient buried truths. Vance realized that the search for the diamond was a diversion, and that the real hunt was for the map that had surely been hidden within the case's lining, or perhaps somewhere else that the thief had already accessed. He began to cross-reference every unsolved cold case file from the last 50 years, looking for patterns of theft involving high-value artifacts that, like the diamond, had suddenly vanished from public record. And he found a horrifying commonality across all of them. A series of subtle, almost invisible markers left at each scene that formed a deliberate path leading toward a singular, dangerous location. Meanwhile, within the sprawling, neon-drenched underworld of the city's abandoned shipping yards, the disappearance of the heart of the Eclipse had sent shockwaves through the various criminal syndicates that operated in the shadows. The Syndicate of Shadows, a shadowy collective of international smugglers and black market power brokers, had been tracking the diamond for over a decade, viewing it as the final key to unlocking a series of maritime trade routes that had been closed to global commerce since the end of the Cold War. Their leader, a man known only as the Architect, paced through his fortified container office, his eyes fixed on a live feed of the police blockade that had failed to catch the Yamaha R1 rider. He knew that Elena, the woman who had orchestrated the heist, was playing a game that transcended wealth, and that her possession of the diamond and the accompanying map meant she was effectively rewriting the geopolitical map of the region. The syndicate realized that they could not simply steal the diamond from her. They had to intercept her before she reached the location marked on the map, which meant they had to mobilize their entire clandestine network to find her. The city, previously a playground for their illicit activities, had suddenly become a hunting ground, where they were no longer the predators, but the prey of a much more efficient, highly trained adversary who knew every move they were planning to make before they even finalized it. Meanwhile, within the sprawling, neon-drenched underworld of the city's abandoned shipping yards, the disappearance of the heart of the Eclipse had sent shockwaves through the various criminal syndicates that operated in the shadows. The Syndicate of Shadows, a shadowy collective of international smugglers and black market power brokers, had been tracking the diamond for over a decade, viewing it as the final key to unlocking a series of maritime trade routes that had been closed to global commerce since the end of the Cold War. Their leader, a man known only as the Architect, paced through his fortified container office, his eyes fixed on a live feed of the police blockade that had failed to catch the Yamaha R1 rider. He knew that Elena, the woman who had orchestrated the heist, was playing a game that transcended wealth, and that her possession of the diamond and the accompanying map meant she was effectively rewriting the geopolitical map of the region. The syndicate realized that they could not simply steal the diamond from her. They had to intercept her before she reached the location marked on the map, which meant they had to mobilize their entire clandestine network to find her. The city, previously a playground for their illicit activities, had suddenly become a hunting ground, where they were no longer the predators, but the prey of a much more efficient, highly trained adversary who knew every move they were planning to make before they even finalized it. The game reached a critical threshold when the Architect, desperate to secure the map, authorized an all-out assault on the Blackwood Ridge estate, ignoring the inherent risks of attacking such a fortified location. His mercenaries, a team of highly trained ex-Special Forces operators, moved through the dense forest under the cover of a moonless night, their infrared sensors scanning for any sign of resistance. But Elena had anticipated their move with terrifying precision. She had rigged the estate's perimeter with a sophisticated series of non-lethal defensive measures that turned the forest into a labyrinth of confusion and disorientation. As the mercenaries entered the kill zone, they found themselves trapped in a series of loop-back pathways where navigation sensors malfunctioned and communication channels were jammed by an electromagnetic pulse that rendered their tactical gear completely useless. Elena watched the feed from her command chair, a calm smile on her face, as the Syndicate's most dangerous assets were neutralized one by one without a single shot being fired. She was not protecting herself from them. She was demonstrating that she was the absolute authority in this conflict, and that any attempt to interfere with the completion of her mission would result in the total and permanent destruction of their organization. The final phase of the operation began as the sun started to rise over the horizon, casting a long golden light across the estate and the defeated remnants of the Syndicate's failed assault. Elena packed her gear, taking only the diamond, the map, and the iron key, leaving the mansion's security systems to wipe all digital records of her presence, effectively erasing herself from history. As she exited through a concealed underground tunnel that led miles away to a private airstrip hidden in the valley, she knew that the real challenge was just beginning. She was heading toward the Alps, toward the final repository of the Meridian, where she would either fulfill her legacy or witness the destruction of the world's most precious secrets. Back in the city, Commander Vance finally unlocked the encrypted files he had been fighting to access the screen flashing with the final coordinate of the map's trail, a location that made his blood run cold. He realized that the heist of the Yamaha R1 was not a crime. It was an invitation, a call to action for anyone with the courage to protect the truth, and he began to assemble his own team to follow the trail. The world was about to change, and the race to the hidden vault had only just begun, with the fate of history hanging in the delicate, beautiful, and deadly balance of a diamond, a map, and an iron key. The private airstrip, nestled deep within the shadowed valleys of the northern range, was completely invisible from standard aerial surveillance, thanks to an overhanging canopy of reinforced camouflage netting that mimicking the Rocky Mountain terrain. Elena stepped out of the hidden underground exit, her boots clicking rhythmically against the cold concrete as a sleek, unmarked carbon fiber private jet powered by experimental silent propulsion turbofans began to spool its engines in the pre-dawn mist. She didn't look back at the city she was leaving behind, nor did she spare a thought for the chaotic media storm that was currently paralyzing the Metropolitan Police Department. Her focus was entirely locked onto the titanium cylinder resting inside her tactical backpack, which now contained the verified physical layout of the Alpine Vault as revealed by the diamond's internal optical matrix. As the aircraft accelerated down the ultra-short runway and lifted silently into the overcast sky, she opened her satellite laptop to monitor the global intelligence feeds, watching with cold amusement as major governments began scrambling their specialized deep cover units to intercept a phantom threat that they still believed was riding a blue and black motorcycle along a distant coastal highway. They were playing a two-dimensional game of speed while she had already transitioned into a three-dimensional chess match for global systemic dominance. In the absolute chaos of the central precinct, Commander Vance was staring at a topographical map of the Swiss Alps that had just populated onto his primary tactical display screen following the decryption of the final data packet. The coordinates pointed directly to a historical blind spot known as the Dead Zone, a jagged precipice where military radar systems consistently experienced unexplained atmospheric interference, and where 3 exploratory expeditions had completely vanished without a trace, during the mid-20th century. Vance knew that standard police protocol was entirely useless now because he was no longer hunting a common thief or even an elite cat burglar. He was tracking an operative who possessed resources that rivaled small nation-states and who moved with a definitive geopolitical purpose. He bypassed his immediate chain of command, completely aware that his department was compromised by corporate informants, and initiated a direct emergency protocol to contact an old friend within the international Black Ops community. He needed a team that didn't exist on paper, utilizing equipment that was never officially manufactured, because the trail left by the Yamaha R1 was no longer a criminal investigation. It had officially transformed into a black-budget military interception mission, where the rules of engagement were entirely non-existent. The private jet crossed into European airspace under a forged diplomatic transponder code that allowed it to glide past international air defense grids without raising a single red flag among NATO tracking stations. Elena looked down through the triple-paned glass at the massive snow-covered peaks of the Alps, rising like ancient jagged teeth through the sea of clouds, knowing that the true test of her lineage was less than 2 hours away. The heart of the Eclipse, Diamond resting in a specialized magnetic suspension chamber beside her, began to emit a faint rhythmic pulse of ultraviolet light as it came into geographic proximity with the subterranean limestone vault that had called to her ancestors for generations. This phenomenon confirmed her deepest hypothesis that the gemstone was never meant to be a static ornament for wealthy aristocrats, but was engineered as a quantum-keyed navigational beacon that responded to the unique tectonic frequencies of the Alpine Rift Valley. She checked her specialized high-altitude, low-opening parachute equipment, ensuring the primary release mechanisms were completely free of ice, because her entry into the dead zone would have to be executed in absolute darkness without the assistance of any electronic altimeters or automated deployment systems that could be intercepted by local border patrols. Meanwhile, the architectural command center of the Syndicate of Shadows was burning with frantic activity as their mainframe struggled to recalculate a trajectory for Elena after losing her signal at the Blackwood Ridge perimeter. The architect sat in total silence, his face illuminated by the harsh blue glare of 20 separate monitoring screens as he realized that his entire global empire had been thoroughly outmaneuvered by a single woman utilizing a piece of ancient vellum and a high-performance Japanese motorcycle. He knew that if Elena managed to unlock the vault before his corporate clients could secure the data, his organization would be systematically liquidated by the ultra-powerful cartels that funded their operations from the shadows. Out of pure desperation, he authorized the activation of Project Cerberus, a highly classified paramilitary strike force stationed at a deniable black site in Austria, equipped with suborbital transport drones and experimental heavy weaponry designed for extreme-altitude combat operations. He issued a standing order that was absolute and chilling. They were to eliminate everything within a 5-mile radius of the Alpine coordinates, ensuring that no biological matter survived and that the diamond was recovered regardless of the physical damage inflicted upon the historical site. Meanwhile, the architectural command center of the Syndicate of Shadows was burning with frantic activity as their mainframes struggled to recalculate a trajectory for Elena after losing her signal at the Blackwood Ridge perimeter. The architect sat in total silence, his face illuminated by the harsh blue glare of 20 separate monitoring screens as he realized that his entire global empire had been thoroughly outmaneuvered by a single woman utilizing a piece of ancient vellum and a high-performance Japanese motorcycle. He knew that if Elena managed to unlock the vault before his corporate clients could secure the data, his organization would be systematically liquidated by the ultra-powerful cartels that funded their operations from the shadows. Out of pure desperation, he authorized the activation of Project Cerberus, a highly classified paramilitary strike force stationed at a deniable black site in Austria, equipped with suborbital transport drones and experimental heavy weaponry designed for extreme altitude combat operations. He issued a standing order that was absolute and chilling. They were to eliminate everything within a 5-mile radius of the Alpine coordinates, ensuring that no biological matter survived, and that the diamond was recovered regardless of the physical damage inflicted upon the historical site. The massive entrance to the vault was an architectural marvel of the ancient world, completely carved into the living granite face of the mountain and concealed behind a massive waterfall that had frozen into a thick, impenetrable wall of solid blue ice over centuries of winter cycles. Elena detached herself from the parachute harness and drew a specialized high-powered plasma torch from her tactical belt, directing the intense hyper-focused heat beam against the ancient ice structure until it fractured into thousands of crystalline shards, revealing the intricate runic carvings beneath. In the center of the stone door was a deep star-shaped depression that perfectly mirrored the exact crystalline geometry of the heart of the Eclipse diamond. She reached into her pack, retrieving the priceless gemstone with steady, gloved hands, and placed it into the stone socket, watching in absolute awe as the ancient mechanisms inside the mountain began to turn with a deep, resonant rumble that vibrated through the very bedrock beneath her feet. The massive stone slabs, which weighed over 40 tons apiece, slowly parted, revealing a long, dark corridor lit by a sequence of ancient bioluminescent phosphors that had remained dormant for over 700 years, waiting for the return of the final keeper. Just as the ancient stone doors began to seal behind her to protect the inner sanctum from intrusion, the distant sound of roaring jet turbines shattered the alpine silence as 3 of the Syndicate's advanced combat drones tore through the cloud layer above. The paramilitary strike force had arrived, their thermal sensors locking onto the heat signature left by Elena's plasma torch, despite the freezing atmospheric conditions. Armed mercenaries clad in heavy mechanized exoskeleton armor began rappelling down from the hovering aircraft, their high-caliber assault weapons ready to tear through any obstacle that stood between them and the ancient treasure. But they were not alone, because less than 2 miles behind them, a fleet of unmarked Black Ops helicopters carrying Commander Vance and his specialized international task force was rapidly closing the distance their targeting systems locked onto the Syndicate's unauthorized aircraft. The mountain was about to become a 3-way kinetic war zone between the desperate forces of corporate greed, the institutional authority of law enforcement, and the ancient legacy of a woman who was already stepping into the deepest secrets of human history. Elena moved deeper into the subterranean temple, ignoring the muffled sounds of explosions and gunfire that began to echo from the outer valley as the battle between the Syndicate and Vance's task force commenced in absolute fury. The corridor opened into a breathtaking central chamber that housed an immense mechanical apparatus resembling a primeval orrery constructed entirely of gold platinum and an unidentified dark alloy that seemed to absorb the ambient light. In the center of this apparatus lay a raised stone dais containing a single ancient manuscript bound in oxidized copper plates, which held the definitive blueprints for a clean global energy network designed by her ancestors before the dawn of recorded history. She realized that this was the true reason why the modern corporate cartels wanted the diamond so desperately. It wasn't to possess a piece of history, but to permanently bury a technology that would immediately render the entire global fossil fuel infrastructure and financial banking systems completely obsolete. She stepped toward the dais, pulling the iron key from her vest, knowing that she had less than 5 minutes to activate the global broadcast sequence before the heavy ordnance being deployed outside shattered the mountain's structural integrity. Outside, the conflict had reached a devastating crescendo as Vance's tactical team utilized heavy anti-material rifles to disable the Syndicate's mechanized suits, while the combat drones continued to rain indiscriminate fire down upon the mountain ledge, causing massive avalanches that threatened to sweep everyone into the abyss below. Vance managed to fight his way past the burning wreckage of a downed transport helicopter, his eyes locked on the shattered ice entrance where he knew the thief had entered. He moved with desperate speed, dodging falling boulders and stray tactical fire, driven by an overwhelming realization that whatever was inside that mountain was the pivot point upon which the future of human civilization would turn. As he crossed the threshold into the ancient corridor, the sudden absolute silence of the subterranean structure struck him like a physical blow, completely masking the chaotic war that was still raging violently just 50 yards behind him. He followed the faint trail of blue light. His weapon raised his heart, hammering against his ribs as he prepared to finally confront the ghost who had started this entire madness with a single Yamaha R1 superbike. When Vance finally burst into the magnificent central chamber, he stopped dead in his tracks, his weapon slowly lowering as he witnessed a spectacle that defied every scientific paradigm he had ever accepted as truth. The immense golden orrery was spinning in absolute silence, its massive metallic rings aligning with perfect astronomical precision, as a pillar of blinding white light shot straight up from the copper manuscript through a concealed shaft in the mountain ceiling toward the upper atmosphere. Elena stood in the center of the light, her hands resting on the control interface, her face completely calm as she turned her eyes to look directly at the exhausted investigator who had chased her across 2 continents. She didn't run, she didn't fight. She simply pointed up at the energy beam, which was currently uploading the ancient technical schematics to a network of decommissioned open-source satellites that would distribute the data to every computer terminal on Earth simultaneously. She looked at Vance and told him in a voice that was both gentle and terrifyingly absolute that the chase was officially over, because the information was already free and there was nothing left for anyone to steal or hide ever again. The screen transitions to a stark, blinding white as the global data broadcast completes instantly, neutralizing every tracking system, weapon grid, and secure mainframe across the entire planet for a window of exactly 3 seconds to signify the birth of a new era. When the visual feed slowly cuts back to the interior of the Alpine chamber, it is completely empty, containing no trace of the golden apparatus, the copper manuscript, or the woman who had protected them for so long. Commander Vance is seen standing alone in the silent stone room, holding nothing but a small metallic object he found resting on the empty stone dais, the ignition key to the Yamaha R1 that had started the chase in the city center. A slow, thoughtful smile spreads across his face as he realizes that the law he had spent his life defending was meant to protect people, not the corporate secrets that enslaved them, and he quietly slips the motorcycle key into his pocket before turning around to walk back into the cold mountain air. The final frame shows the dark blue and black superbike parked inside a completely different hidden garage. Somewhere across the world, its engine cooling silently as a new dawn breaks over a world that will never be the same again.